These included Fort Story, the Army Signal Corps Station at Langley, Quantico Marine Base in Prince William County, Fort Beaver in Fairfax County, Fort Lee near Petersburg, and Fort Eustis, in Warwick County, now Newport News. At the same time, heavy shipping traffic made the area a target for U-boats, and a number of merchant vessels were attacked or sunk off the Virginia coast. Interwar, edit. See also, Roaring Twenties and Great Depression. Temperance became an issue in the early 20th century. In 1916, a statewide referendum passed to outlaw the consumption of alcohol. This was overturned in 1933. In 1926, Dr. W.A.R. Goodwin, rector of Williamsburg's Bruton Parish Church, began restoration of colonial-era buildings in the historic district with financial backing of John D. Rockefeller, Jr. Though their project, like others in the state, had to contend with the Great Depression and World War II, work continued as colonial Williamsburg became a major tourist attraction. Shenandoah National Park was constructed from newly gathered land, as well as the Blue Ridge Parkway and Skyline Drive. The Civilian Conservation Corps played a major role in developing that national park, as well as Pocahontas State Park. By 1940, new highway bridges crossed the lower Potomac, Rappahannock, York, and James Rivers, bringing to an end the long-distance steamboat service which had long served as primary transportation throughout the Chesapeake Bay area. Ferry boats remain today in only a few places. Bird Machine, edit. Main article, Bird Organization. Blacks comprised a third of the population but lost nearly all their political power. The electorate was so small that from 1905 to 1948 government employees and office holders cast a third of the votes in state elections. This small, controllable electorate facilitated the formation of a powerful statewide political machine by Harry Byrd, 1887-1966, which dominated from the 1920s to the 1960s. Most of the blacks who remained politically active supported the Byrd Organization, which in turn protected their right to vote, making Virginia's race relations the most harmonious in the South before the 1950s, according to Vokey. Not until federal civil rights legislation was passed in 1964 and 1965 did African Americans recover the power to vote and the protection of other basic constitutional civil rights. World War II through mid-20th century, edit. The economic stimulus of the World War brought full employment for workers, high wages, and high profits for farmers. It brought in many thousands of soldiers and sailors for training. Virginia sent 300,000 men and 4,000 women to the services. The build-up for the war greatly increased the state's naval and industrial economic base, as did the growth of federal government jobs in Northern Virginia and adjacent Washington, D.C. The Pentagon was built in Arlington as the largest office building in the world. Additional installations were added. In 1941, Fort A.P. Hill and Fort Pickett opened, and Fort Lee was reactivated. The Newport News shipyard expanded its labor force from 17,000 to 70,000 in 1943, while the Radford Arsenal had 22,000 workers making explosives. Turnover was very high. In one 3-month period, the Newport News shipyard hired 8,400 new workers as 8,300 others quit. Cold War and Space Age, edit. In addition to general post-war growth, the Cold War resulted in further growth in both Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads. With the Pentagon already established in Arlington, the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency located its headquarters further afield at Langley, unrelated to the Air Force Base. In the early 1960s, the new Dulles International Airport was built, straddling the Fairfax County-Loudoun County border. Other sites in Northern Virginia included the listening station at Vint Hill. Due to the presence of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet in Norfolk, in 1952 the Allied Command Atlantic of NATO was headquartered there, where it remained for the duration of the Cold War. Later in the 1950s and across the river, Newport News Shipbuilding would begin construction of the USS Enterprise, the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, and the subsequent atomic carrier fleet. Virginia also witnessed American efforts in the space race. When the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics was transformed into the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in 1958, the resulting Space Task Group headquartered at the laboratories of Langley Research Center. From there, it would initiate Project Mercury, and would remain the headquarters of the U.S. manned spaceflight program until its transfer to Houston in 1962. On the eastern shore, near Chincoteague, Wallops Flight Facility served as a rocket launch site, including the launch of Little Joe 2 on the 4th of December, 1959, which sent a rhesus monkey, Sam, into suborbital spaceflight. Langley later oversaw the Viking program to Mars. The new U.S. interstate highway system begun in the 1950s, and the new Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel in 1958 helped transform Virginia Beach from a tiny resort town into one of the state's largest cities by 1963, and spurring the growth of the Hampton Roads region linked by the Hampton Roads Beltway. In the western portion of the state, completion of North-South Interstate 81 brought better access and new businesses to dozens of counties over a distance of 300 miles, 480 kilometers, as well as facilitating travel by students at the many Shenandoah area colleges and universities. The creation of Smith Mountain Lake, Lake Anna, Claytor Lake, Lake Gaston, and Bugs Island Lake, by damming rivers, attracted many retirees and vacationers to those rural areas. As the century drew to a close, Virginia tobacco growing gradually declined due to health concerns, although not as steeply as in southern Maryland. A state community college system brought affordable higher education within commuting distance of most Virginians, including those in remote, underserved localities. Other new institutions were founded, most notably George Mason University and Liberty University. Localities such as Danville and Martinsville suffered greatly as their manufacturing industries closed. Civil Rights Era and Massive Resistance, edit. See also, Massive Resistance and Stanley Plan. In 1944, Irene Morgan refused to give up her seat on an interstate bus and was arrested in Middlesex County, Virginia, pursuant to Virginia's segregation laws. Morgan appealed her case up to the U.S. Supreme Court and, in 1946, won Irene Morgan v. Commonwealth of Virginia, which struck down racial segregation in interstate buses. Virginia continued to enforce interstate bus segregation, and in 1947, activists organized a series of integrated rides, the Journey of Reconciliation, through Virginia and other states of the Upper South in an act of civil disobedience against Virginia's defiance of the Supreme Court's ruling. Another U.S. Supreme Court ruling involving Virginia, Boynton v. Virginia, 1960, desegregated interstate bus terminals. Morgan, Boynton, and the Journey of Reconciliation inspired the 1961 freedom rides that fought bus segregation in the Deep South. Along with the bus desegregation cases, Virginia was a contestant in the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that invalidated laws prohibiting interracial marriage, Loving v. Virginia, 1967. The U.S. Supreme Court ordered Prince Edward County to integrate its schools in 1964. Senator Harry Byrd, the state's dominant politician, was long a champion of constitutional rights against expansion of federal power. He deployed two doctrines in a last-ditch battle against racial integration after the Brown decision of 1954, interposition and massive resistance. The first doctrine proclaimed that the U.S. Constitution allowed the states to interpose state sovereignty, blocking rulings of federal courts from taking effect on local school boards. The new doctrine of massive resistance became a rallying cry across the southern United States to block orders by federal courts to integrate public schools. The test cases came in Virginia, when in 1956 the legislature adopted interposition and urged fellow states to join in. Governor Stanley abandoned his earlier moderation, and the legislature adopted the Stanley Plan. It included 13 segregationist laws, including 5 that were designed to intimidate the NAACP. The governor now had the power to close public schools, and he shut down the first one in Warren County in 1958, followed by Charlottesville and Norfolk. In 1959, both the Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals and the federal court declared the Stanley Plan unconstitutional in terms of both the state and federal constitutions. Governor J. Lindsey Almond broke with Bud. The General Assembly voted to end massive resistance. Nevertheless, from 1959 to 1963, Prince Edward County closed all its public schools. The first black students attended the University of Virginia School of Law in 1950, and Virginia Tech in 1953. In 2008, various actions of the civil rights movement were commemorated by the Virginia Civil Rights Memorial in Richmond. Late 20th century to present, edit. By the 1980s, Northern Virginia and the Hampton Roads region had achieved the greatest growth and prosperity, chiefly because of employment related to federal government agencies and defense, and an increase in technology in Northern Virginia. Shipping through the port of Hampton Roads began expansion which continued into the early 21st century as new container facilities were opened. Coal piers in Newport News and Norfolk had recorded major gains in export shipments by August 2008. The recent expansion of government programs in the areas near Washington has profoundly affected the economy of Northern Virginia, whose population has experienced large growth and great ethnic forward/cultural diversification, exemplified by communities such as Tysons, Reston and dense, urban Arlington. The subsequent growth of defense projects has also generated a local information technology industry. In recent years, intolerably heavy commuter traffic and the urgent need for both road and rail transportation improvements have been a major issue in Northern Virginia. The Hampton Roads region has also experienced much growth, as have the western suburbs of Richmond in both Henrico and Chesterfield counties. On the 13th of January, 1990, Douglas Wilder became the first African American to be elected as governor of a U.S. state since Reconstruction, when he was elected governor of Virginia. Virginia served as a major center for information technology during the early days of the Internet and network communication. Internet and other communications companies clustered in the Dulles Corridor. By 1993, the Washington area had the largest amount of Internet backbone and the highest concentration of Internet service providers. In 2000, more than half of all Internet traffic flowed along the Dulles Toll Road, and by 2016 70% of the world's Internet traffic flowed through Loudoun County. Bill von Meister founded two Virginia companies that played major roles in the commercialization of the Internet. McLean, Virginia, based the Source and Control Video Corporation, forerunner of America Online. While short-lived, the Source was one of the first online service providers alongside CompuServe. On hand for the launch of the source, Isaac Asimov remarked, "This is the beginning of the information age." The source helped pave the way for future online service providers, including another Virginia company founded by von Meister, America Online, AOL. AOL became the largest provider of Internet access during the dial-up era of Internet access. AOL maintained a Virginia headquarters until the then struggling company moved in 2007. In 2006, former Governor of Virginia Mark Warner gave a speech and interview in the massively multiplayer online game Second Life, becoming the first politician to appear in a video game. In 2007, Virginia speedily passed the nation's first Spaceflight Act by a vote of 99-0 in the House of Delegates. Northern Virginia company Space Adventures is currently the only company in the world offering space tourism. In 2008, Virginia became the first state to pass legislation on Internet safety, with mandatory educational courses for 11 to 16-year-olds. In 2013, by a slight margin in the Virginia governor's race, the state of Virginia broke a long-acclaimed streak of choosing a governor against the incumbent party within the White House. For the first time in more than 30 years, the governor and the president were from the same party. Virginia History on Stamps, edit. Main article, History of Virginia on Stamps. Stamps of Virginia events and landmarks include the Jamestown founding, Mount Vernon, and Stratford Hall. See also, edit. Main article, Historical Outline of Virginia. 1. Colonial South and the Chesapeake. 2. Colony of Virginia. 3. Constitution of Virginia. 4. Women's suffrage in Virginia. 5. List of former counties, cities, and towns of Virginia. 6. History of the Southern United States. 7. History of Virginia on stamps. 8. List of newspapers in Virginia / defunct newspapers. 9. Virginia conventions. 10. Native American tribes in Virginia. 11. First Africans in Virginia. 12. History of slavery in Virginia. 13. Tobacco in the American colonies. References, edit.
Good. That was a good long read. And it's too many. So that take like 1 month to read this. It's 11 p.m. So did read this 3 Virginia, Northern Virginia, Eastern Virginia. So just continue tomorrow. Just getting up tomorrow and read something else, but I cannot read in a logical order, as I have to start reading some all kind of random. I have to read and close because I have many hundreds, and I think I need to buy more. I will go to the bookshop, buy more paper, to buy a little bit candy. I need to go to the bookshop and buy some more paper. Because if my computer crash, I cannot find it again maybe. All kind of candy like this. alligator. You have in South Carolina and North. Did open a lot. Let's try find the New York State. Oh, that's the one I did read, then I open all this. So we have to pull it down to number 1. Like this. Because if I open more, all this will go away. So we have to move all this down. But I have to sit do this alone.